100 ounces. That's roughly 6.5 pounds of gold. If you held it in your hands right now, it would fit inside a single shoebox. At today's prices, that shoebox contains approximately $267,000. Not a fortune by Wall Street standards, not enough to buy a house in most major cities, but apparently it's enough to make you a person of interest. On January 15, 2026, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, quietly updated its beneficial ownership reporting guidelines. Buried on page 47 of a 312-page regulatory update was a single paragraph that changes everything for physical precious metals holders. The threshold for mandatory dealer reporting on cumulative gold purchases has been lowered from $10,000 per transaction to $10,000 aggregate annually. And there's a new category. Anyone holding 100 troy ounces or more of physical gold bullion is now classified as a substantial precious metals holder, subject to enhanced financial monitoring. This is not about taxes. This is not about crime prevention. This is about creating a registry. The math tells the real story. 100 ounces represents roughly 0.000003% of all above-ground gold ever mined. It's a rounding error in global terms. Yet this specific threshold, not 50 ounces, not 500, was chosen with surgical precision. According to industry data, approximately 2.3 million Americans currently hold between 50 and 200 ounces of physical gold. The 100-ounce line captures the maximum number of middle-class precious metals holders, while excluding the institutional players who measure their positions in tons, not ounces. They're not targeting the billionaires, they're targeting you. Here's what they're not telling you. At 4:47 p.m. Eastern on January 14th, one day before the public announcement, an encrypted memo was distributed to the 12 regional Federal Reserve banks and the 4 largest bullion dealers in the United States. The memo, portions of which have since been leaked to financial researchers, outlined what regulators are calling Project Sentinel. The stated objective: create a comprehensive database of physical gold holdings in private American hands by Q3 2026. The mechanism is elegant in its simplicity. Bullion dealers are now required to file Form 8300 PM, a new variant of the standard cash reporting form, for any customer whose cumulative purchases exceed $10,000 within a calendar year. But here's the critical detail that transforms reporting into surveillance. The form requires dealers to document not just the current transaction, but to estimate the customer's total holdings based on purchase history. Your dealer isn't just reporting what you bought today. They're building a profile of everything you've ever bought. The official justification, according to Treasury spokesperson communications, is anti-money laundering enhancement and tax compliance optimization. These phrases sound reasonable until you examine who's actually being monitored. Drug cartels don't buy American Eagles from local coin shops. Terrorist organizations don't accumulate wealth in 1-ounce gold bars stored in home safes. The people captured by this regulatory net are retirees converting IRAs to physical metal, small business owners diversifying outside the banking system, middle-class families who watched 2008 and decided to hold something real. The enforcement infrastructure is already being built. In December 2025, the IRS quietly hired 2,400 new agents specifically assigned to alternative asset compliance, a category that includes precious metals, cryptocurrency, and collectibles. These aren't auditors reviewing tax returns. These are investigators with subpoena power, trained to trace physical asset flows through the financial system. And the timing is not coincidental. This is where the lie becomes unsustainable. The distinction between paper gold and physical gold has never mattered more than it does right now. If you own shares in GLD, the Spider Gold Trust ETF, you are not subject to Project Sentinel. If you hold gold futures contracts on COMEX, you face no enhanced monitoring. If your gold exposure exists purely as digits in a brokerage account, claims on metal you will never touch, stored in vaults you will never visit, you remain invisible to the new surveillance apparatus. Only physical holders are targeted, only those who took possession. The reason reveals the desperation behind the policy. Paper gold can be created infinitely. When authorized participants need more GLD shares, they simply work with custodians to create new units backed by gold that may or may not actually exist in allocated form. The leverage in the paper gold system currently stands at approximately 118 paper claims for every physical ounce available for delivery on Western exchanges. This ratio has expanded by 340% since 2019. Paper gold is controllable. Its price can be managed through futures selling, options manipulation, and the endless creation of synthetic exposure. When the price needs to decline, Institutions simply sell contracts they have no intention of delivering. The selling pressure is absorbed by a market that trades over $180 billion in notional gold exposure daily, less than 0.4% of which ever results in physical delivery. But physical gold exists outside this control matrix. When you hold metal in your possession, you have removed an atom from the system that can never be rehypothecated, never be leveraged, never be multiplied into 100 synthetic claims. You have opted out of the paper architecture entirely. And opting out is now being treated as suspicious behavior. The divergence between paper and physical has entered a new phase. In Zurich, physical gold currently trades at a $47 premium over London spot price, the widest gap since March 2020. Shanghai premiums have averaged $31 over COMEX for the past 6 weeks. But here's what the price charts won't show you: delivery times. Private vault facilities in Switzerland are now quoting 8 to 12-week wait times for new storage clients. Singapore's 3 largest precious metals depositories have waiting lists exceeding 4,000 names. The metal is there. The price is available. But the system is straining to actually move physical gold from point A to point B. The premium isn't greed, it's friction. It's the market's way of pricing the difference between a promise and possession. When institutions do what they're doing now, they're not managing risk, they're containing disaster. On January 3rd, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York conducted an unscheduled liquidity operation at 11:15 p.m. Eastern, a Friday night when markets were closed and journalists were off duty. The operation injected $4.2 billion into overnight lending markets through a mechanism typically reserved for acute banking stress. The stated reason: technical adjustment to reserve balances. The timing? 72 hours before the FinCEN announcement. Less than 48 hours later, JPMorgan Chase quietly restructured its precious metals derivative book, transferring approximately $12 billion in gold-linked exposure to a newly created subsidiary domiciled in the Cayman Islands. The restructuring was disclosed in a footnote on page 847 of their quarterly supplement, a document read by perhaps a few hundred analysts worldwide. The last time JPMorgan restructured precious metals exposure into offshore vehicles was September 2019. What followed was the March 2020 gold market dislocation, when COMEX futures briefly traded $80 below physical prices, and the London market experienced what insiders described as multiple near failures in settlement. Now examine what the Bank for International Settlements published in their December 2025 quarterly review. Gold lending rates between central banks spiked to 4.7% in Q4, the highest since 1999, when the Washington Agreement was signed to prevent European central banks from destabilizing the gold market through uncoordinated selling. That agreement expired in 2019. What replaced it? Nothing public, nothing transparent. But something is clearly happening behind the curtain, because central banks don't pay 4.7% to borrow gold from each other unless physical metal is extraordinarily difficult to source. The countdown element is specific. Project Sentinel's first mandatory reporting deadline is April 15, 2026. By that date, every bullion dealer in the United States must submit initial customer holdings estimates to FinCEN. The database goes live July 1st. Full enforcement, including penalties of up to $25,000 per unreported substantial holder, begins October 1st. You have approximately 9 months before your name is either in the registry or you've made decisions that keep it out. While one side monitors, the other side takes possession. The People's Bank of China added 44 tons of gold to its official reserves in December 2025 alone. This follows 62 tons in November and 51 tons in October. The 3-month accumulation of 157 tons represents the most aggressive quarterly buying by any central bank since records began. But the official numbers are a floor, not a ceiling. China's actual gold imports through Hong Kong and direct Swiss shipments exceeded 280 tons in Q4. The difference between reported reserve additions and total imports suggests substantial accumulation is occurring outside official channels, likely through sovereign wealth funds, state-owned enterprises, and military pension systems that don't report to the IMF. Russia's approach differs in form but matches in substance. Since Western sanctions froze $300 billion in Russian foreign exchange reserves, the Kremlin has accelerated conversion of remaining dollar and euro holdings into physical gold stored on Russian soil. Their official reserves now exceed 2,350 tons, more than the holdings of France and Italy combined. The Shanghai Gold Exchange continues to drain metal from Western vaults. In 2025, the SGE delivered 2,847 tons of physical gold to Chinese buyers, a 23% increase over 2024 and more than global mine production for the year. This gold flows east and does not return. It enters a system where ownership is permanent, storage is sovereign, and Western price discovery mechanisms have no jurisdiction. The contrast crystallizes into a single frame. Western governments are building registries to track citizens who hold gold. Eastern governments are building vaults to hold gold themselves. This is not about price. This is about who controls settlement. The BRICS Alliance announced in November 2025 that their proposed multilateral payment system will include a gold settlement option for commodity trades. The mechanism is still being finalized, but the architecture is clear. Participating nations can settle trade imbalances in physical gold at prices determined by the Shanghai benchmark, bypassing dollar-denominated markets entirely. If a Saudi oil minister decides to accept gold for crude, a scenario that seemed fantastical 5 years ago and now appears in mainstream financial planning documents, the pricing reference will be Shanghai, not London. The settlement will occur in Beijing's clearinghouses, not Western banks, and the gold that flows to Riyadh will be removed permanently from the supply accessible to paper markets. This is what a system looks like when it runs out of time. The policy contradiction is mathematically unresolvable. Western governments need gold prices low to maintain confidence in fiat currencies, but keeping prices low through paper manipulation requires the paper-to-physical leverage to continuously expand. And expanding that leverage requires either more physical gold entering Western vaults, which isn't happening, or the creation of ever more synthetic exposure against a shrinking base. The pressure valve is now physical gold holders themselves. If regulators can discourage accumulation through surveillance and reporting burdens, they slow the drain. If they can make holding physical metal uncomfortable enough, audits, documentation requirements, social stigma, some holders will sell back into the paper system. But this creates its own doom loop. Every holder who sells to avoid scrutiny adds supply to a market desperate for physical metal. Every ounce that re-enters circulation through distressed selling is immediately absorbed by Eastern buyers who face no surveillance consequences. The registry doesn't reduce Eastern demand. It simply transfers Western-held metal to stronger hands. The trap has no exit that doesn't accelerate the underlying crisis. Consider the historical parallel that regulators hope you don't remember. In 1933, Executive Order 6102 required American citizens to surrender their gold holdings to the Federal Reserve. The penalty for noncompliance was a $10,000 fine, approximately $230,000 in today's money, and up to 10 years in prison. The confiscation price was set at $20.67 per ounce. 1 year later, after the gold was safely in government vaults, the official price was reset to $35. Those who complied lost 41% of their wealth overnight. Those who defied the order and hid their gold, a choice made by an unknown but substantial number of Americans, preserved their purchasing power through the Depression and beyond. The 100-ounce threshold is not confiscation, not yet, but registries precede confiscations the way target lists precede raids. You don't build a database of gun owners unless you're considering policy options that require knowing where the guns are. You don't create a registry of physical gold holders unless you're contemplating scenarios where that knowledge becomes operationally necessary. The historical lesson is clear. Governments don't conduct surveillance on assets they have no intention of controlling. The question is not whether the financial system faces a reckoning. The arithmetic makes that inevitable. The question is, who understands what's happening while choices still exist? Those paying attention notice that bullion dealers report a 340% increase in customers requesting private vault storage in non-US jurisdictions since the FinCEN announcement. They notice that allocated gold accounts in Singapore, New Zealand, and the Cayman Islands have waiting lists measured in months. They notice that certain ultra-high net worth individuals are restructuring precious metals holdings through legal entities that fall outside Project Sentinel's reporting scope. These observations are not investment advice. They are simply what the data shows. The informed understand that 100 ounces held in personal possession on American soil now carries different implications than 100 ounces held in an allocated account in Singapore. They understand that the distinction between owner and beneficial owner matters enormously when regulatory definitions are being rewritten. They understand that what you can document as legal and what you cannot document as existing are, in the eyes of the emerging surveillance state, two very different categories. Understanding is not about panic. Understanding is about seeing the board clearly while pieces can still be moved. The divergence between paper price and physical reality will continue to widen. The institutions creating paper claims will continue creating them until they can't. The governments tracking physical holders will continue tracking them until the metal is either surrendered, hidden, or moved beyond their jurisdiction. And somewhere in this process, at a date no one can precisely predict, the accumulated pressure will exceed the system's ability to suppress it. Paper will be revealed as paper. Promises will be revealed as promises. And physical possession will be revealed as the only form of ownership that cannot be defaulted upon, diluted, or deleted with a keystroke. Reality always asserts itself. The only variable is whether you understood what was happening before it did. The clock reads 9 months to the first deadline. The registry goes live in 6. What happens between now and then is not something to predict. It's something to prepare for. Atoms don't care about policy announcements. Gold doesn't read regulatory filings. Metal simply exists. And those who hold it will discover in the months ahead exactly what that existence means in a system that has run out of room to pretend otherwise.